He says they are poisoning the blood of America.
We're just ordinary people.
So what he's saying is the ideal version of America is a white America.
Baby, tonight you need that. Tonight, believe that.
And anytime brown people infiltrate America, they're messing up the blood of America.
All she wanna do is, dance.
They're messing up the gene pool of America. And that takes us back to Hitler.
You all met on the set of one of your videos?
Yes.
We did.
'Cause all of me
Chrissy, give me your version. How did it happen?
loves all of you.
We did the video and then we had sex.
What if I told you that the most polished man in music, the voice behind wedding anthems and political campaigns, wasn't the man you think he is? That John Legend, the media's golden boy, the safe black artist America paraded across red carpets and political rallies, might actually be one of the most carefully manufactured celebrities of our time? Because while the world saw a soulful crooner with Ivy League charm, what they didn't see were the cutthroat business deals, the industry manipulation, the elite-level PR machine that covered up career flops, marriage drama, and a messy fallout with Kanye West. This is the same John Legend who got caught in Oprah-level drama behind the scenes, who watched his wife Chrissy Teigen get nearly canceled by the same internet that made her famous, and who quietly sold half of his music catalog before the headlines even noticed. Was this strategic genius, or a man cashing out before it all crumbled? Because behind that baby grand piano was a man playing a much bigger game, with politics, power, and perception all working in his favor. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the legend, not the myth the media built, but the man the industry protected. This isn't just a story about music. This is about how image sells, how power protects, and how John Legend became one of the most untouchable and unquestioned figures in modern entertainment. So ask yourself, is John Legend really a legend, or just the industry's most brilliant illusion? From the moment John Legend appeared on the scene, the branding was crystal clear. This was Mr. Perfect, Ivy League educated, impeccably dressed, no criminal record, no wild antics, just a smooth gospel-influenced voice and a piano. And that wasn't an accident, because behind that overnight sensation narrative was a years-long manufacturing process, a calculated transformation of John Roger Stevens into John Legend, a marketable crossover superstar for the Oprah generation. Let's break it down. John came from Springfield, Ohio. Smart, reserved, raised on church music and academic ambition. By 16, he was in college. By 23, he was working behind the scenes in the music industry while holding a corporate job at Boston Consulting Group. And while he'd tell you that he was hustling, the truth is he was being groomed. Early cosigns from Lauryn Hill and Kanye West gave him street credibility. But it was his positioning that made him valuable. He was never the edgy Kanye. He was never the bad boy R&B singer. He was the safe black man white America could get behind. And the name John Legend? That wasn't even his idea. It was a marketing move, suggested by poet Jay Ivey and heavily pushed by Kanye's camp to give him instant gravitas. Think about it. Would John Stevens have sold millions of records? Would John Stevens have booked the Obama inauguration? Now here's the twist. When John initially hesitated to take the name Legend, saying it was too much pressure, the people around him insisted. They knew that image mattered more than music. They weren't branding an artist. They were building an archetype. The industry needed someone like John, someone talented but clean, woke but not radical, political but non-threatening, a man who could speak to civil rights issues on CNN without scaring off Target's marketing team. And John played the role flawlessly. But playing Mr. Perfect came at a price. It meant swallowing industry betrayals, brushing off marriage scandals, and staying silent when the people around him got publicly dragged. The image wasn't just an asset, it became a prison. Because the higher he climbed, the more John Legend had to protect the illusion of perfection, even when everything around him was quietly falling apart. You'd think someone like John Legend, polished, articulate, the kind of guy who quotes Maya Angelou and plays the piano barefoot on stage, would be Oprah approved for life. And for a while he was. Oprah Winfrey loved John Legend, promoted his work, invited him on her show, publicly praised his intellect and artistry. He was the kind of black excellence she built an empire celebrating. But then, something shifted. It happened quietly. No viral fallout, no public feud, just a slow freeze-out from the Oprah machine. One day he was everywhere in her world. Own network promos, live performances, mentions in her favorite things. The next? Gone. Iced out. Barely a whisper. So what happened? Insiders point to a private disagreement over John's increasingly aggressive political tone, especially around police reform, prison abolition, and criminal justice activism. You see, around the time John Legend began funding documentaries like 13th and Free America, and becoming more vocal about issues like mass incarceration and defunding police, Oprah was facing her own backlash for being too quiet on those same topics. And according to a well-placed source close to both camps, there was a meeting where John directly challenged Oprah on her silence. It wasn't confrontational, at least not on the surface, but it was bold. Too bold for someone who'd been a safe figure in her world for years. Allegedly, he said something to the effect of, "With your platform, you could change policy tomorrow, but you're not saying anything." That didn't go over well, because if there's one thing Oprah doesn't like, it's being told she's not doing enough, especially by someone she helped elevate. The meeting ended awkwardly. Calls got delayed, invitations dried up. Suddenly, John Legend wasn't the go-to, thoughtful black celebrity in her circle anymore. That title went to people like Ava DuVernay and Ta-Nehisi Coates, activists with their own lanes, who didn't come from the music industry. John, for all his accolades, got benched. And what makes it even messier? Oprah never publicly addressed the tension. She didn't cancel him. She just moved on, quietly, coldly, strategically. To this day, fans still ask why John Legend hasn't done another OWN special, or why Oprah didn't feature him in her high-profile Legends Ball retrospectives. The answer isn't in press releases. It's in the power moves that never make headlines. Because when you bite the hand that fed you in Hollywood, even if you're right, you pay for it. Let's talk about the Grammys. Because John Legend didn't just win them, he played them. And the way he maneuvered behind the scenes turned him from an underdog to a music industry gatekeeper. Most people think John Legend exploded overnight with Get Lifted. The truth? That album didn't blow the roof off the charts. It didn't dominate radio. But it cleaned up at the 2006 Grammy Awards. 3 wins, including Best New Artist. And from there, his legacy as a serious artist was locked in. But here's the twist no one talks about. John Legend didn't just earn those Grammys. He aligned himself with the right power players. We're talking Grammy board members, Recording Academy insiders, and the elite clique of producers who quietly determine nominations. Legend's early mentor, Kanye West, before the meltdowns, when he was still seen as a visionary. Kanye's influence opened doors, but it was Legend's own political polish and Ivy League energy that made him a favorite son in rooms where image matters more than innovation. And while other artists of his era, Neo, Music Soul Child, Anthony Hamilton, were fighting for respect in the urban categories, John Legend was sitting at the big table, getting nominations in mainstream categories. He wasn't boxed in, he was the exception. But here's where it gets shady. Multiple insiders have suggested that Legend's team has long worked the Grammys like a political campaign. Strategic performances, album drops right before eligibility deadlines, collaborations with industry darlings, Sarah Bareilles, Alicia Keys, and yes, even Tony Bennett. It's a formula, a polished, calculated path to legacy status. And it worked. By 2021, John Legend had 12 Grammy wins. 12. More than Prince, more than Marvin Gaye, more than Luther Vandross. But let's be honest, does John Legend have a classic album? A defining cultural moment that changed music forever? Even his fans hesitate, because the truth is, John Legend's Grammy dominance says more about the politics of prestige than about cultural impact. He fit the mold, he knew the playbook, and he played it flawlessly. But behind the scenes, that created resentment. Artists who felt boxed into R&B categories saw Legend glide into pop and general field categories without any of the same roadblocks. And that quiet resentment boiled over in 2022, when whispers began about Legend's alleged role in shaping Grammy nominations for others. Some even claimed he was acting as a behind-the-scenes advisor for new artists trying to secure nods. Nothing was ever confirmed. But it fueled a perception that John Legend didn't just win the game, he helped rig it. If John Legend is the polished Ivy League prince of pop and politics, Then Chrissy Teigen was supposed to be the relatable, foul-mouthed queen of the internet, the cool wife, the anti-Karen, the model-turned-clapback goddess. But when the internet turned on Chrissy, it torched both their images. Let's rewind. For years, Chrissy and John were Hollywood's favorite power couple. Date night selfies, Vogue spreads, their kids, Luna and Miles, being paraded as the next Obamas of family branding. It was smart, calculated, marketable. Chrissy was brash, John was calm. She said what she wanted, he smiled in a tux. They had the perfect opposites attract synergy until Chrissy's Twitter history came back to haunt them both. In 2021, Chrissy Teigen was exposed for cyberbullying, and not just casual dragging, relentless harassment. From telling then-teen mom Courtney Stodden to take a dirt nap, to mocking Lindsay Lohan's self-harm, to publicly body-shaming, slut-shaming, and DMing people horrific messages behind the scenes. This wasn't clapback culture, it was mean girl sadism disguised as humor. And the backlash? Swift, savage, and surprisingly sustained. Chrissy lost deals with Macy's, Target, Bloomingdale's, and cookware endorsements worth millions. And here's where John Legend comes in. Because while all this was imploding, he went silent. No defense, no statement, just vague retweets and business as usual. And the internet noticed. People started asking, why isn't John holding Chrissy accountable? Does he condone it? Is this the real them? Behind the scenes, PR teams were scrambling. Sources from branding agencies revealed that major advertisers distanced themselves from both Chrissy and John. Because you can't be America's golden couple when your wife is trending for cyberbullying a 16-year-old. And while Chrissy released a weepy apology on Medium, claiming she was in therapy, growing, and didn't remember half of what she tweeted, critics weren't buying it. Especially after fashion designer Michael Costello came forward with his own story. He said Chrissy blackballed him after a photoshopped DM, called him a racist, and tried to ruin his career. And again, John said nothing. This led to the next phase of their PR nightmare, the cancel culture hypocrisy argument. Here was John Legend, a man who speaks out about social justice, cancel culture, prison reform, staying quiet while his wife weaponized online mobs against marginalized people. The contradictions were glaring. The backlash wasn't just about Chrissy anymore. It was about him and the illusion that he was somehow above the mess. By 2022, their once adoring press turned icy. Public sentiment cooled. Brand deals slowed. Chrissy quit Twitter, only to come back weeks later. And every comeback attempt felt forced. The Legend Teigen empire wasn't over, but it was cracked, and fans started asking, if Chrissy was this cruel behind the scenes, what don't we know about John? By now, John Legend wasn't just a Grammy winner. He was a brand, a polished spokesperson for social justice, an Oscar-winning activist, the black man white liberals love to love. But here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. John Legend didn't just become America's safe black celebrity. He was built for it. And behind that perfectly curated image is a web of political gatekeeping, elite access, and backdoor deals that helped shape him into the ideal spokesman for the system. Let's get into it. When John endorsed Barack Obama in 2007, it wasn't a shocker. He was Ivy League, eloquent, and deeply connected to the same donor class. But what people didn't realize at the time was that John wasn't just supporting Obama, he was being elevated by Obama's team. He was invited to private fundraisers, given prime spots at campaign events, and eventually became a regular at high-level DC political circles. It worked. It was a win-win. Obama got a young, cool, non-threatening black voice with cultural clout. John got proximity to power. But fast forward to the Trump era, and John's political positioning took a darker, more strategic turn. He wasn't just disagreeing with Trump. He was making political activism a core part of his brand. Twitter threads, public statements, TV appearances denouncing hate, division, and white supremacy. All noble causes, no doubt, but some critics started to question, was John performing outrage for clout, or was he actually putting skin in the game? Because behind the scenes, people were noticing a pattern. John would speak passionately about prison reform, yet partner with brands that profited off prison labor. He'd talk about income inequality, while hosting $50,000 per seat dinners for Nancy Pelosi. He aligned with establishment Democrats, Hollywood elites, and Silicon Valley giants. all while presenting himself as the voice of grassroots change. And don't get it twisted, this isn't about his politics. It's about the calculated performance of activism. It's about how John Legend became the perfect black spokesperson for elite white liberalism. Polished, safe, non-combative. An entertainer who talked about race, but only within the acceptable boundaries. When Kanye West started pushing back on the system, the two had a now infamous fallout. John publicly criticized Ye's Trump support, saying, "You're betraying your people." But Ye clapped back with a now iconic screenshot. "John, you're just saying what you're expected to say because of your position." And whether you like Kanye or not, that comment hit a nerve, because people started to look closer at John, at the polished scripts, the curated interviews, the consistent alignment with power. And the question became, is John Legend really fighting the system, or is he benefiting from it? While pretending to resist, even within the black community, whispers grew louder. He was being called a Democratic puppet, a celebrity politician with no real roots in the struggle, a man who could sing about glory, but never speak on the glory he was soaking up from the system itself. And in 2020, when protests exploded after George Floyd's murder, John was noticeably absent from the front lines. Instead, he performed at benefit concerts and posted statements. But he wasn't marching. He wasn't clashing with cops. He wasn't risking anything. Because when your brand is perfection, the last thing you do is get dirty in the chaos. At one point, John Legend and Kanye West were inseparable. They weren't just collaborators. They were brothers in arms. Kanye discovered him, produced his debut album, put him on stages he never would have reached on his own. Legend's breakthrough? Largely owed to Kanye's audacity. Back when Kanye was still trying to convince people that a backpack rapper could make soul music, he introduced John as the next voice of soul. Smooth, elegant, educated, the antidote to the rawness of Kanye's own persona. The two were magic, musically. Ordinary people. Used to love you. Heard 'em say. Their chemistry was undeniable, but behind the scenes, they were walking two very different paths. Kanye was chaos. He was media meltdowns, defiant rants, MAGA hats, and shocking sound bites. John was diplomacy. He was award shows, CNN panels, tuxedos, and White House performances. For a while, their differences were seen as balance. But when Trump entered the picture, the split turned nuclear. In 2018, Kanye shocked the world by donning the red MAGA hat and aligning himself with Donald Trump. Everyone went silent, but not John. He immediately texted Kanye privately, trying to talk him out of it. "Don't let this be part of your legacy," he warned. Kanye, he posted the screenshot to Twitter, exposing John's words and accusing him of manipulation. "You're just using your fame and influence to pressure me into being who they want me to be." Kanye shot back, "Not who I really am." That moment broke something, not just between two men, but between two ideologies. John represented the mainstream, safe, scripted, palatable to both white audiences and elite institutions. Kanye represented the unfiltered, messy, offensive, unpredictable, but undeniably authentic, for better or worse. From that point on, the brotherhood was over. John would go on to say in interviews that they simply grew apart, that Kanye's political views created an irreparable rift. But insiders say it ran deeper. This wasn't just politics. This was positioning. Kanye was taking a sledgehammer to the system that had built John. And John, he couldn't afford to be anywhere near the rubble. Behind the scenes, there were murmurs that John was being advised that staying close to Kanye could jeopardize partnerships, brand deals, and his rising stature in political circles. Even fans noticed. John stopped performing their collaborations live. His interviews got tighter, more rehearsed. He was distancing himself not just from Kanye, but from the version of himself that Kanye helped create. The irony? Kanye helped give John his voice, only for John to later use that voice to denounce him. To many, it felt like betrayal masked as growth. A breakup where one friend went rogue, and the other decided to play it safe, for the sake of his image. And yet, both suffered. Kanye's legacy took hit after hit. But John, he started facing backlash from both sides. To some, he looked like a sellout. To others, a coward who hid behind politics instead of standing up for a friend. And perhaps the real tragedy is this. The split didn't just expose a friendship. It exposed an industry where loyalty is conditional, image is everything, and even the people who make it out can end up trapped in the roles they were handed. For years, John Legend was a chart darling. He wasn't just critically respected, he was commercially invincible. From Ordinary People to Greenlight, from All of Me to Glory, he struck a rare balance, soulful enough for the Grammys, catchy enough for pop radio, and clean enough for wedding playlists. A walking, singing endorsement deal. But then something strange happened. The music stopped working. After All of Me dominated the airwaves in 2014, going diamond and becoming one of the best-selling digital singles of all time, John Legend's career should have gone stratospheric. Instead, it plateaued. His next albums, Darkness and Light, 2016, and Bigger Love, 2020, got polite applause, modest streaming numbers, and Grammy nods, but no real cultural heat. And then came Legend, 2022, a sprawling double album that barely made a dent. Critics called it safe, overproduced, and emotionally hollow. It was a shock. This was the man once compared to Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder, now reduced to background music for brunch. So what happened? Insiders point to a few things, and none of them are flattering. First, overexposure. John wasn't just releasing music. He was everywhere, coaching on The Voice, singing commercial jingles, hosting award shows, promoting skincare, real estate ventures, wine labels, and political causes, all at once. The man was doing everything except being an artist. Second, the safe zone. Legend's image, once seen as elegant and refined, became predictable. In an era of raw, vulnerable, chaotic stars like Frank Ocean, The Weeknd, SZA, and even Doja Cat, John felt manufactured, too polished, too curated, too tame. Third, the Chrissy problem. As Chrissy Teigen's social media scandals mounted, some fans began to associate his music with her drama. And while he never wavered in his public support, the whispers were getting louder. Is this the real John Legend? Or just a husband cleaning up the brand? But the real gut punch to his music career came when the industry started quietly moving on. In recent years, Legend has struggled to land hit collaborations with younger, streaming-dominant artists. Gone were the Kanye, Alicia, and Common collabs. In came lower-tier features and forgettable soundtrack songs. Even the Grammys, his longtime safe space, started to snub him. By 2023, he was being overshadowed at his own genre's events. Meanwhile, critics and fans alike began to ask the hard question: was John Legend ever truly a musical innovator, or just a well-dressed middle-of-the-road voice for a safer time? It's a tough pill to swallow, especially for an EGOT winner. But in the brutal world of music, accolades don't equal relevance. And perhaps most revealing, his most talked about moment in recent years wasn't a song, it was his Legend skincare line launch, which many interpreted as a pivot away from music. Some said he was just expanding his brand. Others whispered the truth. The music isn't moving people anymore, so he's moving on. And that's where the mystery deepens. Because John still has the voice. He still has the name. But somewhere between activism, overexposure, and domestic distractions, the spark disappeared. And maybe, just maybe, the biggest secret of all is John Legend didn't lose his career. He outgrew it. Or worse, he let it die quietly, rather than risk evolving into someone the industry couldn't control. In early 2022, quietly, and without much fanfare, John Legend did something most A-list artists never admit until they're broke, desperate, or retired. He sold his soul, or at least his life's work. To be specific, he sold the rights to his entire music catalog, including publishing and master recordings, to BMG and KKR, one of the largest private equity firms in the world. Now let's break that down, because this wasn't just a business move. This was a signal. This was John Legend, the EGOT winner, the activist, the luxury crooner, handing over the rights to every note he ever recorded, from Used to Love You to All of Me, and everything in between. It was unprecedented, because artists typically sell their catalogs later in life. Think Bob Dylan, Stevie Nicks, or David Bowie's estate, when their touring days are over and they're ready to cash out for retirement. But John was only 43, still performing, still releasing albums, still branding himself as the now of R&B. So why cash out early? Some called it smart, others called it suspicious. Let's start with the money. Sources estimate the deal was worth $70 to $100 million, depending on back-end points and licensing rights. That's generational wealth, if you manage it right. But here's where it gets murky. Private equity firms don't buy music out of love. They buy it to exploit it. Licensing, advertisements, film placements, TikTok virality, streaming bundles, elevator music, airline playlists, AI training datasets. Once you sell your catalog, you have zero control over where your voice is heard. Your heartbreak ballad could be in a diaper commercial. Your protest anthem could score a tech billionaire's campaign rally. And once it's gone, it's gone. Now, some artists don't care, but others see it as the ultimate betrayal of their message, their legacy, and their fans. So the question becomes, did John Legend sell because he wanted to, or because he had to? That's where the speculation heats up. Insiders have long whispered that John's lifestyle, from the Beverly Hills mansions to the staff, security, investments, and luxury brand partnerships, requires constant liquidity. And let's not forget, he's not just managing his career, he's managing Chrissy's PR cleanup, their 2 kids, surrogacy expenses, lawsuits, brand deals, and a massive domestic empire. Some say the catalog sale was a power move to stay liquid while quietly exiting the music game. Others believe it was a sign that the music machine around John was collapsing, and this was the final cash grab before the spotlight faded. Either way, the timing is telling, because shortly after the deal was done, John's music output slowed, his public appearances became more curated, and suddenly, the guy who once championed artist independence became a blueprint for corporate consolidation. Even more damning, KKR, the firm that bought his catalog, also invests in surveillance tech, military contracts, and controversial housing developments. So yes, John Legend, the activist who sang Glory, is now being funded and possibly profited from by firms connected to causes he publicly fights against. That's not just ironic, that's tragic. And maybe that's the real story here. The man who spent years building a pristine image, the activist artist, the loyal husband, the soulful voice of conscience, eventually did what many artists before him have done. He picked the bag over the message, and in doing so, he gave the world permission to turn his life's work into a commodity, a jingle, a stream, a brand. And when you sell your catalog, you're not just selling songs, you're selling your voice. By now you might be wondering, if John Legend's career was so calculated, so curated, was any of it real? Well, here's the twist no one talks about. John didn't just play the industry, he studied it, broke it down, memorized the rules, then rewrote them for himself. This isn't a guy who stumbled into fame. This is someone who engineered a long game, playing the role of artist, activist, and brand ambassador with surgical precision. Let's rewind. Before he was John Legend, he was John Stevens, Ivy League graduate, corporate consultant by day, studio rat by night. He wasn't just singing, he was networking. He wasn't just dreaming, he was strategizing. In an industry that chews up talent and spits out broken shells, John approached music like a chessboard, not a passion project. And what was his first major move? Aligning himself with Kanye West. At the time, Kanye was the golden child of Rockefeller. Brilliant, erratic, magnetic. But John saw more than hype. He saw access to production, to studio time, to labels, to gatekeepers. He embedded himself deep into the Kanye camp, became the quiet opposite to Kanye's chaos. The safe bet. He co-wrote, played piano, built trust. Then when the time was right, he stepped out, not as an underground neo-soul artist, but as a pre-approved, clean-cut, Grammy-ready, Oprah-friendly soul singer. Perfectly packaged, perfectly timed. But here's the genius part. He never let himself get trapped in one box. He dipped into jazz without becoming a jazz artist, dabbled in gospel without becoming Kirk Franklin, touched R&B but never leaned too raunchy, spoke political but always vague enough to keep brand deals safe. He wasn't building a music career. He was building a franchise. Every album, a step, every feature, strategic, every public statement, a chess move toward mainstream longevity. Even his name, John Legend, was a conscious branding choice, a nickname turned into a prophecy. He didn't earn the legend title. He declared it, then forced the world to make it true. But here's where the game gets dark. The more calculated he became, the less authentic the music felt, and fans noticed. Get Lifted felt alive, but by Love in the Future, critics were calling him formulaic. By Bigger Love, many said he was running on fumes. relying on lush production and Instagram aesthetics to cover for lyrical hollowness. Why? Because the deeper you go into the system, the harder it becomes to create something real. And John Legend had become the system. A voice coach, a skincare line, a wine label, a home decor influencer, everything, except a hungry artist. He won the game. But in doing so, some say he lost the spark. Worse, his career became a blueprint for the new industry machine. Package the artist brand, the marriage license, the voice, sell the soul, and call it success. But when the algorithm changes, when the headlines cool down, when the next generation wants something raw again, what happens to the guy who played it all too safe? So now that the image is fading, the music's cooled off, and the scandals are harder to scrub away, what exactly is John Legend going to be remembered for? The answer might depend on who you ask. To some, he'll always be the voice of weddings and award shows, the man who made All of Me the unofficial soundtrack to every engagement video in the 2010s, a mainstream heartthrob with a golden voice, a loyal marriage, and a spotless suit. To others, he's the activist who dipped his toe into politics, the guy who stood beside causes like criminal justice reform and voting access, but never too far from corporate approval. An Instagram-friendly revolutionary. Safe, palatable, never unpredictable. To industry insiders, he's the blueprint. The guy who figured out how to weaponize respectability, optimize image, and convert talent into brand equity. John didn't just win awards, he monetized virtue. But here's where the narrative gets cloudy, because while he was being polished and praised, his artistry was being forgotten. Ask someone to name their favorite John Legend song, and most people can't go beyond Ordinary People or All of Me. That's over a decade of music, boiled down to 2 overplayed ballads. There's no Thriller, no Confessions, no Channel Orange, no album that shifted culture, no moment that changed sound. Even the EGOT, Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony, feels more like a resume badge than a cultural touchstone. He got the accolades, sure, but did the music move people? And let's not forget, in recent years, more people know John Legend from The Voice, his Twitter debates, or his appearances on Chrissy Teigen's social media than from anything he's recorded since 2016. And that begs the uncomfortable question. Did John Legend trade musical immortality for marketable likability? Was he ever trying to be timeless? Or was he always aiming to be inoffensive, in demand, and invisible behind designer suits and camera-friendly lighting? Because the truth is, John Legend's career is a masterclass in staying visible without ever being vulnerable. He gave us love songs, yes, but he rarely gave us himself. His real story, the pain, the fear, the rage, the missteps, stayed hidden beneath perfect piano chords and pre-written award speeches. And in a world now obsessed with realness, raw emotion, and unfiltered truth, being too perfect is starting to feel like the biggest scandal of all. Outrow. So where does that leave us? John Legend is still rich, still booked, still smiling, but behind the curated Instagram posts, the endless brand deals, the late-night smiles, and carefully chosen headlines, lies a bigger truth. He's not the villain, but he may not be the hero either. He's not fake, but he's not fearless. He didn't sell out, he bought in, fully, brilliantly, and unapologetically. And now, the curtain's pulled back, and we finally see how much the industry loves a legend, who never makes them uncomfortable. So next time you hear his voice in a Target ad or background music in a Netflix documentary, ask yourself, is that still John Legend the artist? Or just the brand? Want more exposés on your favorite celebrities, creators, and corporate icons? Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's keep pulling back the curtain. Because behind every perfect image, there's always a story they don't want you to hear.